You are now listening to the Vegan Stuff Podcast with Caavakushi.
Hosting this podcast today are our two AI hosts, Sam and Kim. If you simply can't get enough of us, go to caavakushi.com and sign up for our vegan newsletter and get our free 7-day high-protein vegan meal plan. And we also have some good news. We will be releasing our first ever cookbook pretty soon, so stay tuned. Hey, don't forget to follow us on our socials too.
Welcome. And today we are looking at something that is, well, probably sitting in your closet right now.
Or maybe shoved in a drawer somewhere.
Right, exactly. Something folded up, something you maybe only pull out when the weather really drops.
Yeah.
We are exploring a surprisingly intense and highly debated topic that is hidden right inside our clothing. We're talking about the production of Angora wool and, a bit later, mohair.
And our mission today means we really have to synthesize a massive stack of sources. I mean, we are looking at everything from aggressive undercover animal rights campaigns by groups like PETA, Four Paws International, and the Plant-Based Treaty.
Which are pretty heavy to read through.
Very heavy. But then we're also pulling in the more nuanced defensive perspectives from the crafting community, like retailers such as Lovecrafts. And to give us a real socio-political lens, we have some fantastic reporting from Prospect Magazine. So the goal is to piece together how this luxury fiber is actually harvested, the intense global backlash against it, and ultimately what it reveals about ethical consumerism today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the journey we're taking today goes from the basic biology of these really fluffy animals through some truly horrific allegations of abuse, and then we look at the defense from suppliers who claim to be completely ethical.
Which is a whole debate in itself.
Oh, absolutely. And then straight into massive corporate PR blunders, and finally, a fascinating cultural shift happening right now in China.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is Angora wool? Because I think most people have touched it at some point, right? It's often compared to cashmere or silk.
Yeah, it's highly prized for its extreme softness, its lightness, and obviously its warmth.
But there's a big misconception here that we need to clear up immediately.
Yes. Angora wool comes from the Angora rabbit, not the Angora goat.
Which is confusing.
Very confusing. The Angora goat produces mohair. That's a completely different fiber, an entirely different industry, and we will get to that goat a bit later in the deep dive.
Right, so Angora wool equals rabbit.
Exactly. And the biology of this rabbit is really where the whole story starts. According to the German Animal Welfare Federation, Angora rabbits are intentionally bred to have just excessively, unnaturally fluffy wool.
So they wouldn't look like this in the wild.
No, not at all. This is an animal genetically manipulated over generations to produce an exorbitant amount of fur.
And what kind of volume are we actually talking about?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when I picture a sheep being sheared, the pile of wool is massive.
Well, the data from Four Paws puts this right into perspective. An average Angora rabbit produces only about 200 grams of wool a year.
200 grams?
That's it.
Wow. That is barely enough to make a single child-sized jumper. So the industry is quite literally splitting hairs to maximize profits here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are. And because the yield per animal is so tiny, you need millions of these rabbits to meet global fast fashion demand. It's entirely a volume game.
Millions of them.
Yeah. And to understand what that volume means in practice, we have to look at the psychological and physical nature of the rabbit itself. Margot de Mello from the House Rabbit Society points out something crucial about their biology.
They are prey animals.
Right. Rabbits are prey animals. From an evolutionary standpoint, they are virtually silent. In the wild, if you make noise, you attract predators.
They die.
Basically, yeah. So they do not vocalize unless they are in sheer, absolute agony or facing imminent death.
Which is a really dark biological fact, but it becomes essential when we start looking at the undercover footage from these animal rights groups.
It does, because when investigators record a rabbit screaming,
Which they did.
they did,
Yeah.
that sound is a biological indicator of profound trauma. It is the sound of an animal that firmly believes it is being killed.
And the physical trauma seems to begin just from the way they are bred, right? Long before anyone even tries to harvest the wool. The German Animal Welfare Federation uses a specific term for this.
Torture breeding.
Yes, torture breeding. Because these rabbits are selectively bred for coats that are so incredibly thick, they physically cannot groom themselves properly. And rabbits are like cats. They naturally clean themselves with their tongues.
That grooming instinct is hardwired into their biology. But if an Angora rabbit tries to groom itself, it inevitably ingests massive amounts of this artificially long hair.
And rabbits can't throw up.
No, they completely lack the physiological ability to vomit. So this leads to a highly dangerous buildup in the stomach. The medical term is a trichobizor.
A fatal hairball.
Exactly. It causes severe gastrointestinal issues where the rabbit essentially starves to death with the stomach completely full of its own fur.
That is just a terrifying design flaw forced onto them. And the sources mention other daily physical struggles, too. The fur grows so thickly over their faces that it impairs their sight.
Yeah, and they're highly susceptible to heat stress because they're wearing this unnatural winter coat year-round.
Plus, if the fur gets matted with waste, they suffer from fly maggot infestations. Just existing in their own bodies is a struggle.
So when you take an animal that requires meticulous, constant care just to survive its own genetics, and you house them on an industrial scale,
things get really bad.
very bad. Severe welfare challenges.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
We need to look at the investigations from PETA Asia, Four Paws, and the Plant-Based Treaty, because the sheer scale of the operation is overwhelming.
90% of the world's Angora comes from China.
90%.
And estimates point to anywhere from 20 to 50 million rabbits farmed annually. And this is in a country that currently has zero animal welfare legislation protecting them.
Wait, not at all.
Zero federal laws governing how these specific farm animals must be housed, handled, or treated. No legal penalties for agricultural cruelty.
So without regulations, what do the physical conditions on these farms actually look like? Because rabbits are highly social, intelligent animals. In the wild, they dig, they jump, they form lifelong bonds.
But on these industrial farms, they are kept in extreme solitary confinement. They live their entire lives in wire mesh cages that are scarcely bigger than their own bodies.
Why solitary? Why not put a few together?
It's purely economic. Social interaction, playing, cuddling, even just bumping into another rabbit, it risks tangling or soiling the profitable fur. The animals are treated as isolated fiber-producing units.
That physical toll must be immense. The cages are described as being so small they can't even sit upright.
Which leads to painful spinal deformities over time.
And then there are the wire mesh floors.
Right, the flooring is designed so that waste falls through and doesn't stain the white fur. But the rabbits are forced to stand continuously on bare wire, which gets soaked in urine.
And they don't have hard paw pads like dogs or cats.
Exactly. Their tender feet become raw, ulcerated, and inflamed. Plus, the strong smell of ammonia rising from the waste pits directly below the cages routinely causes severe eye infections.
It's just bleak. But we have to talk about the harvesting process. This is the part of the undercover footage that sent shockwaves through the internet. According to the sources, live plucking is rife in the industry.
Yes.
But why pluck the fur? Why not just shave them?
Because the longer hairs, when plucked entirely from the root, are much more valuable in the textile market. Shorn hair has blunter ends and just doesn't spin as smoothly into premium yarn.
So for a slightly smoother yarn, they rip it out.
Yeah. The PETA footage shows workers tying rabbits to wooden boards or literally hanging them from the ceiling by their front legs to immobilize them. Then they forcefully rip the fur out by the handfuls right down to the roots.
The reports mention workers pulling rabbits out of cages by their ears, which are highly sensitive.
Very sensitive. And going back to what we discussed about their biology, these silent prey animals are recorded screaming in absolute terror during this process.
And they're not using any pain relief.
None. On a commercial farm, speed correlates directly to profit. Anesthetics would cost money and time. After being plucked completely bald, the rabbits are thrown back into their wire cages.
Which means they're suddenly fully exposed to the elements, without any insulating fur.
The temperature shock alone is brutal. That, combined with the profound psychological stress, causes some rabbits to go into deep shock.
The investigators documented rabbits dying from heart failure.
Heart failure. Or suffering broken spines from violently struggling against the restraints during the plucking.
The overall life cycle of these animals is incredibly dark. And it's even worse for the males. Because female rabbits naturally produce more wool, male rabbits are considered an unwanted byproduct.
They are often killed right at birth.
It's so similar to the egg industry, where male chicks are culled immediately because they can't lay eggs. They're just a financial drain.
Exactly the same economic parallel. And for the females who are kept alive, their timeline is drastically cut short. A healthy rabbit in a loving home can live 8 to 12 years.
but on the farm.
They are mathematically unprofitable after just 2 to 3 years. That's when their wool yield starts to drop.
So what happens then?
They are slaughtered, usually hung upside down, their throats are slit, and their bodies are sold off for meat to extract that final fraction of a cent of value.
Nothing is wasted. The PETA investigators even found an instance where a rabbit had died in its cage from stress, and a worker was recorded shearing the wool off its lifeless body.
Total extraction, regardless of suffering.
It really paints a horrifying picture.
Yeah.
But to make sure we are rigorously examining all the sources provided, we have to look at the other side of this debate.
Yes, we need to bring in the perspective of the crafting community.
Right. Specifically referencing the detailed source from the retailer Lovecrafts, because they argue very strongly against a blanket boycott of Angora wool.
They claim that humane harvesting absolutely does exist, and that ethical Angora is a viable option for consumers.
And their argument seems to hinge on a mix of breed biology and agricultural economics. How do they justify the harvesting process we just described?
Well, they point out that harvesting methods depend entirely on the specific breed of the rabbit. This is a nuance they feel gets lost in the broader campaigns.
So not all Angora rabbits are the same.
Right. Breeds like the German, Giant, and Chinese require shearing because their hair doesn't naturally fall out. But English and French Angora rabbits naturally shed or molt their coats on a seasonal basis.
So ethical farmers of these specific French and English breeds aren't violently plucking live attached hair.
According to Lovecrafts, they gently comb or pull out the already dead hair over a period of several days as the new coat naturally grows in.
And they argue this is actually a relief for the rabbit.
Exactly. It makes them more comfortable and prevents those fatal hairballs. They compare it to brushing out a thick-coated dog like a husky in the spring.
Lovecrafts actually shares a very specific anecdote to back this up. They highlight a video taken on an Angora farm in New Zealand.
Yeah, the video shows a 4-year-old rabbit being calmly shorn with electric clippers. The host of the video notes it's about the rabbit's 15th shearing in its lifetime.
And the body language of the animal is the real focal point of their defense. The rabbit is completely unrestrained on a table. It's sniffing around, investigating its surroundings.
It shows absolutely no fearful body language. Its ears are upright and relaxed. They are not pinned flat back against its head.
Which animal behaviorists recognize as a universal sign of a terrified rabbit?
Right. If the ears are pinned back, the rabbit is stressed. In the video, the ears are up.
And if we connect this to agricultural economics, Lovecrafts makes a very pragmatic point. They argue that stress, poor health, and physical injuries fundamentally ruin the quality of the wool.
Because ripping out a rabbit's coat by the roots leaves the skin highly vulnerable to bacterial infection and disease.
They quote a statistic suggesting a 60% mortality rate within 1 to 2 years on farms that utilize cruel plucking methods.
Therefore, Lovecrafts argues, it makes zero economic sense for a farmer aiming to produce high-quality, premium artisan yarn to torture their animals. Dead or sick rabbits represent a total loss of investment.
So they advocate for supporting ethical small-scale farms, like the ones producing Rowan's Angora haze yarn.
Their philosophy is that rewarding good, meticulous farmers with consumer dollars is a much better strategy to drive out the cruel industrial operations than a total blind boycott.
So we have two intensely opposing views here. The crafters say the solution is to support the good guys. The animal rights groups look at the global supply chain and conclude that the good guys simply don't exist at a scale large enough to supply the fashion industry.
Right. So what does this mean for the consumer? How do groups like PETA and Four Paws respond to this humane defense from Lovecrafts?
They really don't seem to buy it.
Not at all. They explicitly state that humane Angora is a total myth, especially when we're talking about commercial fashion.
And they tackle the humane label head-on by pointing to an investigation by a French animal rights group called One Voice.
Yes, because often brands will claim that since they source their Angora from Europe rather than China, it automatically ensures high welfare.
Because Europe has much stricter agricultural laws.
While Europe does generally have better baseline laws, the undercover footage from these French farms showed a reality that completely contradicted the high welfare marketing.
The investigators documented rabbits tied to tables, their limbs twisted into completely unnatural positions, and workers violently ripping fur from the most sensitive areas of their bodies.
So the core counter-argument from the animal rights groups is one of scalability. On a massive commercial scale, the gentle, multi-day combing process described by Lovecrafts simply isn't profitable.
When a global fashion line needs tons of fiber for a winter collection, gentle grooming gives way to rapid, forceful extraction.
Which brings us to the absolute PR minefield this discrepancy has created for the corporate fashion world.
Oh man, the PR disasters.
When that initial PETA video showing the live plucking dropped, it sent shockwaves through the retail industry.
And the internal mechanics of how these brands responded were incredibly revealing. I have to share the anecdote about the iconic British streetwear brand, Kangol.
The bucket hat company.
Yes, famous for those fuzzy bucket hats from the 90s and early 2000s. So PETA US sent Kangol executives the undercover footage showing the rabbits screaming.
And what did Kangol do?
The executives immediately started drafting an internal crisis PR strategy email. But someone accidentally copied PETA on the email chain.
A catastrophic clerical error.
Completely disastrous. The email literally laid out their strategy in plain text. It read, quote, "Do nothing unless it escalates."
Wow. That represents a classic corporate crisis management response. The boardroom calculation is just hoping a scandal will blow over if ignored.
Because issuing a statement draws more attention to it.
Exactly. But in the age of social media and digital activism, do nothing is a highly radioactive strategy, especially when faced with visceral, emotive video evidence.
It certainly didn't work for Kangol. And it didn't work for others who tried the exact same playbook. Look at Gwyneth Paltrow's brand, Goop.
Right. They initially tried the do-nothing approach when they were publicly called out for selling Angora sweaters.
But the digital pressure didn't stop. They ultimately caved and pulled the products after receiving over 33,000 targeted emails from activists.
Then you have French Connection. Their trajectory was fascinating. They banned Angora initially when the heat was high, then quietly brought it back into their collections later, hoping no one would notice.
Bet people noticed.
They absolutely noticed. French Connection got hit with an overwhelming 100,000 emails from consumers. They were forced to issue a very public, permanent ban.
It really proves you cannot pull the wool over the consumer's eyes once they've seen the reality of the supply chain.
It is a profound testament to the power of consumer activism today. The sources indicate that over 500 major global brands have now banned Angora entirely.
We're talking massive industry players defining the market. Zara, H&M, Gucci, Calvin Klein, Farfetch.
This isn't just a fringe movement. It has fundamentally reshaped global fashion sourcing.
But the sources also point out that holdouts still exist. They specifically name luxury and boutique brands like Dior, K.I.T., Yan, and Scott Sweaters.
These brands are currently the targets of ongoing email and social media campaigns because they continue to sell the fiber despite the industry consensus.
Let's shift our focus back to the global epicenter of this entire industry, China. Because 90% of the world's Angora comes from there, understanding the deeply rooted cultural dynamics in China is essential.
And we have a fascinating source from Prospect Magazine that dives into that socio-political history.
The historical context they provide completely reframes how we look at this. To understand the current landscape of animal welfare in China, you have to look back at the Mao era.
During Mao's tenure, the very concept of loving animals or treating them as companions or pets was officially denounced by the state.
It was politically labeled as a Western bourgeois concept.
Right. Animals were strictly categorized and viewed through a purely utilitarian lens. They were resources for human use, whether for labor, food, or materials.
And that utilitarian view became deeply entrenched in the institutional framework of the country. But Prospect Magazine highlights a striking contrast with today's youth in China.
The younger generation didn't grow up in that era of strict utilitarianism. They grew up in a rapidly modernizing economy with domestic pets.
They grew up watching movies with talking animals.
The cultural baseline shifted dramatically. So when that PETA video of the Angora rabbits was released, it didn't just cause outrage in the West. It was posted on the Chinese video sharing platform Youku, and the metrics were astounding.
It got over 200,000 views in a single month.
And it sparked massive local condemnation from Chinese citizens.
The empathy in the comments was palpable. People were saying things like, "What if someone tried to pull your hair off like that?"
It wasn't just a Western reaction being projected onto China. It was an organic, internal outcry, which raises a really complex question about how social change happens in environments with restricted political expression.
The article provides some incredible anecdotes of this cultural shift manifesting in real-world action, like the story of the Chinese blogger and the dog trucks.
That's a powerful one. There was a Chinese blogger who spotted a convoy of trucks carrying 1,100 dogs bound for a slaughterhouse. Under older cultural paradigms that might have been ignored.
But he used social media, specifically Weibo, to broadcast the convoy's real-time location.
He rallied local police and hundreds of everyday advocates who physically intercepted the trucks on the highway and saved those dogs.
And it's not just grassroots bloggers, it's massive celebrities, too. Look at Yao Ming, the legendary basketball player.
He led a huge public crusade against the consumption of shark fin soup, which used to be a deeply ingrained status symbol.
His campaign was incredibly effective. Yao Ming's advocacy successfully cut the consumption of shark fin soup in China by up to 70%.
In just 2 years. Another striking example from the text. 70 highly influential Chinese celebrities signed a petition that successfully blocked the stock market flotation of a major pharmaceutical company that extracted bear bile.
What is particularly insightful from the Prospect magazine analysis is the underlying political reality of this activism. The Chinese government currently does not have overarching animal cruelty laws.
So why do they allow these massive protests to happen? It's a fascinating loophole. The government generally allows and tolerates this kind of animal welfare activism because it is perceived as politically safe.
Protecting a dog or advocating for a rabbit doesn't pose a direct threat to political stability or the ruling party's authority.
Advocating for animals becomes a rare, sanctioned outlet for collective grassroots organizing and expressing empathy.
It's a safe valve for civic engagement. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, we have to address the goat in the room.
The Angora goat.
Yes. We mentioned earlier that Angora wool comes from rabbits, but the Angora goat produces a fiber called mohair. Our source from the Minimalist Vegan gives us a critical look into this parallel industry.
While the animal is entirely different, many of the economic pressures and ethical themes remain identical. And while China dominates the rabbit market, South Africa absolutely dominates the global mohair industry.
They produced roughly 50% of the world's supply.
That equates to about 7.9 million pounds of mohair every single year, shown from a population of roughly 859,000 goats.
And just like the rabbits, these goats have been heavily selectively bred for profit. While a wild goat naturally sheds its coat seasonally based on the weather, these domesticated Angora goats have been genetically bred to shed year-round.
Which creates a biological dependency. Because they shed continuously, they require constant shearing by humans just to prevent them from becoming dangerously entangled in their own hair. They cannot survive in the wild.
Unfortunately, the cruelty allegations follow this industry just as closely. PETA investigations into South African mohair farms showed highly distressing footage.
Workers were documented dragging the goats by their horns and their legs. They were hoisted up by their tails and literally flung across the hard wooden shearing floors.
The goats were recorded screaming during the shearing process.
Because the workers are paid by volume rather than by the hour, the shearing is often done recklessly and at high speeds, leaving the goats with severe flesh wounds that are sewn up on the spot without any pain relief.
It led to massive brands, again like Zara and H&M, dropping mohair from their lines entirely after the footage was made public.
This brings us to a really profound philosophical argument presented by the minimalist vegan source. They ask a fundamental question that challenges even the Lovecraft's defense we discussed earlier.
They ask, even if a goat is shorn completely painlessly, without any cuts, without any stress like taking a pet dog to a groomer, is the resulting product actually ethical?
The vegan perspective argues that no profit-driven animal agriculture can truly be cruelty-free. The reasoning is rooted in the power dynamic.
The animal's very existence, its selective breeding, its lifespan, its daily care, it's all entirely dependent on its financial value to humans.
The relationship is based fundamentally on extraction, not companionship. If the price of mohair drops globally and there is no profit to be made, the financial incentive to feed, house, and care for those 859,000 goats vanishes overnight.
The animal only has value as long as its hair has value.
The source suggests that if you want to be completely sure you aren't contributing to this cycle of commodification, the only true solution is to look at alternatives.
And the good news for the consumer is that textile technology has advanced incredibly. There are so many viable alternatives now.
If you want that soft, warm, fluffy texture without the ethical baggage, you don't have to sacrifice the aesthetic.
You can look for garments made from bamboo, tencel, hemp, or organic cotton.
Tinsel is particularly interesting. It is a cellulose fiber made from sustainably sourced wood pulp, but structurally it can be spun to mimic the exact lightness and drape of luxury animal fibers.
You can also look for high-quality recycled synthetic fibers like viscose or acrylic. You just have to make it a habit to check your clothing labels closely before you buy.
So, to bring this all together, the journey of this material, from a fluffy rabbit in a wire cage or a goat on a South African farm to a luxury sweater on a rack, is incredibly complex.
It is fraught with allegations of extreme suffering. It involves murky global supply chains. It causes corporate PR panic. And it's at the very center of evolving global ethics.
If we connect all of this data back to the listener, it begs the ultimate question. Why does knowing this matter?
It matters because every single time you buy a sweater, a hat, a scarf, you are casting a vote with your wallet. We mentioned that incredible 80% drop in Chinese Angora exports following the undercover investigations.
That didn't happen because governments suddenly passed new regulations.
Exactly. It happened because consumer awareness directly and forcefully reshaped a global industry. Your purchasing decisions have tangible impact worldwide.
So true.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over today. In many parts of the world, rabbits are the third most popular pet, right behind dogs and cats.
We fiercely protect our pets. We pass stringent local laws to ensure they aren't abused, and we spend billions of dollars annually on their health care and comfort.
Yet, as a society, we seem incredibly capable of compartmentalizing. We can industrialize and exploit those exact same animals with the exact same biological capacity for fear and pain, the moment they offer us a luxury good like a soft sweater.
The dissonance is staggering.
It really is. So the next time you see a luxury label on a fluffy garment, ask yourself this: are we paying for the inherent quality of the garment, or are we just paying a premium to keep the brutal reality of its production hidden safely from our view?
That is the core question at the heart of ethical consumerism, and I thank you all for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep looking closely at those labels and keep questioning the systems that build the world around you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you liked this episode. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Also, we would be so appreciative if you could just share this episode or this podcast with all your friends and family who are vegans or vegan friendly. We're also really excited because we are going to be launching something really cool pretty soon on the site, so keep an eye out for that. And we will see you really soon with a new episode.